Since 2003, several historians of the New Testament have carried out studies that have overwhelmingly supported the reality of the resurrection of Jesus from the dead, and even revealed the form that it took. Today, we'll be hearing from one of the best-known experts in this field, Dr. Gary Habermas. But before we hear from him, let's take a brief background of the historical evidence for the resurrection of Jesus.
The offering of evidence begins with St. Paul in his first letter to the Corinthians. He goes through an extensive list of witnesses to the risen Jesus, beginning with St. Peter, and then the 12 apostles, and then 500 disciples. He mentions that most of them are still alive and presumably living in the area of Jerusalem, so his readers can go check it out themselves.
Perhaps most interesting is the way that St. Paul presents the problem that all of his witnesses had to face. He shows that they have everything to lose and nothing to gain by preaching Jesus as risen. If the witnesses believe in God and they are lying about the resurrection, they emerge as perjurers before God. And worse than that, they make themselves into the worst of men by undermining their Jewish faith and the God of their forefathers by this lie. If they truly believed in God, why would they do this and risk eternal punishment by this terrible deed? If the witnesses don't believe in God and they are lying about the resurrection, well, there isn't going to be a resurrection to look forward to. So why would they risk and give up everything, their financial status, their social status, and endure persecution for the sake of Jesus if there's no resurrection to look forward to? As St. Paul says, if there is no resurrection, they may as well eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow they will die.
So either they believe in God and a resurrection, and they risk everything by undermining their Jewish faith, or they don't believe in God and a resurrection, in which case they are lying, and all the sacrifices they're making are meaningless. They lose everything and gain nothing by lying.
Exactly. And this makes them the best kind of witness. The same techniques are used in our modern court system today. Attorneys will try to prove that their witness has nothing to gain.
But in the case of the resurrection, they have everything to lose. We've come a long way since the time of St. Paul, and historians have honed careful techniques in establishing the historicity of events, not just Christian events, any historical event. These techniques are called criteria for historicity, and were brought into New Testament studies by great scholars such as Joachim Jeremias and Raymond Brown. This brings us to our next guest, Dr. Gary Habermas. Dr. Habermas received his PhD from Michigan State in history and the philosophy of religion. He's debated skeptics and atheists on television. He is now a research scholar at Liberty University in Virginia. Let's go to him now.
I'm the guy that does a head count on where scholars are today, because I've been checking the death and resurrection of Jesus and trying to put together a bibliography and line up where scholars are from 1975 to the present. So give or take 40-ish years. And even the skeptics, even the agnostics, even the guys who just don't even like Christianity, will tell you that Christianity's, the earliest report of the resurrection appearances goes back to the early 30s AD. Now, it would take us a while to unpack that, but the earliest report, there's several from the 30s. And again, the death of Jesus would be about 30 AD. The earliest is from 1 Corinthians 15, and Paul's writing this. He's the author. People don't deny Paul being the author. But Paul says this material in 1 Corinthians 15, 3 and following, Paul says this material is not mine. I got it from somebody else, and that's how they trace it back. Paul writes this about 55 AD, which is only 25 years after the cross. Again, Alexander, the two best known biographies on Alexander the Great are 400 to 450 years. Paul's writing this just 25 years later. But Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15:3, he says, I delivered to you, when I came and preached to you, Corinthians, Greeks, when I came to you, I gave you what I was given. I passed on to you what was passed on to me. Now, I'm going to just stop there and note, Josephus tells us that the Pharisees, of whom we know from Paul's own word, he was a Pharisee when he was, before he was a Christian. Pharisees, like any good teachers, pass on tradition to their students. They're taught by somebody, and it's all about who you studied under, just like today. You know, I took my PhD under wow, you study under him, that kind of thing. Well, according to the book of Acts, Paul studied under Gamaliel, who's the top Jewish scholar at that time. And Paul says, I gave you what